It is just a huge honor today to be podcast interviewing my buddy Sheldon Krancher with ClearTPS.com. This is a very interesting story. With over 25 years of experience in healthcare, Sheldon Krancher has spent the last decade integrating Invisalign into practices globally. Sheldon has held positions that include Regional Development Manager and Director of Business Development for Align Technologies in the U.S. and Europe, and currently provides consulting services to Align Technology. In these highly specialized roles, Sheldon has had the unique opportunity to work with hundreds of practices in the U.S., Canada, UK, Ireland, and across Europe. Sheldon has a true passion and proven track record of success with the Invisalign Practice Integration. In 2012, Sheldon co-founded Clear Treatment Planning Solutions, ClearTPS.com, and in 2014 co-founded Clear Marketing Solutions. Sheldon lives with his wife and 3 children in Friendswood, Texas, and enjoys traveling and starting new business ventures in the dental profession. Where is Friendswood?
So Friendswood is just south of Houston proper, Houston downtown, and just north of Galveston, of course, on the Gulf Coast. So we're pretty close to the water.
So tell us your story. How did you leave high school 25 years ago and end up in dentistry? Out of all the professions on earth, why are you not a plumber or an electrician? How did you end up in dentistry?
It's really an interesting story, Howard. Out of high school, my first real job, I ended up working in the mailroom at Cigna Healthcare. And of all things, I basically handled dental claims. And
what year was that?
That was in 1988.
Wow, 1988, you got a job at Cigna.
I did. And I worked for them for about 8 years. And in various capacities, I was a benefit analyst, and really saw the side of healthcare, from a managed care perspective, and then moved on to customer service. And then kind of fast forward in 1995 or so, I started working at UCLA School of Dentistry, and so really got involved in dentistry from a continuing education perspective, where I had exclusive responsibility for managing all of the international dental study programs there at UCLA. And so
you did 8 years at Cigna, and then how many years at UCLA?
So I was there for 5 years, 3 years of which was at UCLA itself, and 2 years was in Europe, in the Netherlands, where I completed my undergraduate studies. But I was also recruiting and promoting and marketing the international CE programs at UCLA. We had a fairly large contingency in the European market, worked very closely with the likes of Sasha Jovanovic, a real progressive name in the implant world. We did a lot of perio and implant and aesthetic courses, and we recruited a lot of European dentists for that.
So were you born in Amsterdam?
No, I was born in California originally. My parents were born in Indonesia, and then they immigrated to the Netherlands. But I have roots in the Netherlands and have lived there several times throughout my life.
And so now do you know why your mom moved from the Netherlands to California? She didn't want to raise her children in the red light district?
Yes, that and the weather.
And the weather. Oh, I love Amsterdam. So what do you think of Amsterdam and their laissez-faire, lenient policies on all social issues?
It's interesting. It's a very progressive, very, very liberal society, of course. But I think the history is interesting. From that same point of view, very, very inclusive. I think very progressive in many regards. I think they remain one of the most economically stable and sound countries in the world today, in the dynamic, globalized world that we live in. So I think they've done some things right. I think certainly plenty of things are debatable and seen maybe a little bit differently. But it's a great place.
I prefer the Amsterdam model. I think all these vices are horrible in their own ways, but it's locking people up and throwing away their life is not the answer to something that you don't agree with what they're doing, like smoking pot or prostitution or whatever. I mean, I don't think it's I think it's hard to reconcile being a doctor or a healer or someone who goes 8 years of college to help their patients and then look at other problems and say, oh, the answer to that is to throw you away in a cage. Well, that's there's got to be a better solution than criminalization. Sure. So in my lifetime, I got out of school 29 years ago. And 29 years ago, most of the big brands, Colgate, Crest, Oral-B, Lister, they were all made. I would say the biggest brand made in dentistry in my 29 years was Invisalign. It went from non-existent. I mean, I've lectured in Indonesia, Malaysia, South Africa. I mean, everybody on the planet has heard of Invisalign. I mean, you go to a restaurant in any country in the world, and the waitress finds out you're a dentist. Her first question is about Invisalign. You got to give kudos to Invisalign. I mean, I don't care if you like their technology or not. You got to give their marketing an A plus plus plus. No one marketed better in dentistry than Invisalign in my lifetime.
Absolutely agree, Howard, 100%. And that is, in fact, part of our platform. And we're very, very fortunate to have a very strong working relationship with Align Technology. Of course, I spent 8 years of my life working for them in the U.S. and in Europe as well. And we have an ongoing relationship with them. They're our largest client, and they endorse our services, frankly. And that's, I think a compliment to what we do and how we do it. But there's no question that the conversation that we have with our practices, with our clients, prospective clients, is what you just said. The enormity of the name of Invisalign. It is no doubt the best known dental and orthodontic brand in the world, period. Nothing comes even close. And so the question becomes, how do we leverage that? How does a general dentist leverage that? How does an orthodontist leverage that brand awareness? We talk a lot about co-branding with our practices in terms of, okay, we understand that you want to brand your practice in a certain name, a certain way, whether it be a name, a doctor's name, whatever. But how is it that we're missing the mark on leveraging such an incredible brand and brand name with Invisalign? Huge opportunity there for doctors and practices everywhere.
Well, dentists, the natural selection to become a dentist or a physician or a lawyer is somebody who lives in a library. So when you go back to college, all your party animal friends didn't make the grades to become a dentist and a lawyer and a physician. So the people that end up being dentists were usually shy, introvert people who lived in a library, and they're the same personality as a physicist, an engineer. And what I love about endodontics and Invisalign is dentists aren't good in sales. When I see the people that are crushing it in cosmetic rehabs and boob jobs and face and lifts and tummy tucks, they're charismatic people that can sell. Well, that's not my average homie. My average homie doesn't like to sell. I mean, in fact, she'll tell you, I didn't go to school 8 years to be a salesman. And what I love about Endo and Invisalign, with the root canal, they're coming in and they're saying, Sheldon, I hurt, man. I can't sleep. I'm taking aspirin. Can you help me? And it's like, yeah, if you can do a root canal, sold. And they're coming in saying, yeah, you can't throw a cat on Facebook and not hear about Invisalign. I'd like to inquire about Invisalign. The problem is they all come out of school. They've never done one Invisalign case in school. So right now you're talking to a lot of kids who said, Sheldon, I just graduated $350,000 in student loans. They didn't teach me 1 hour about ortho, let alone Invisalign. So let's start with baby steps. So we're on the first floor now. We want to walk up a stairway and eventually be on the second floor doing a lot of Invisalign. What's stair one? How the hell do I learn how to do Invisalign?
Yeah, it's an excellent point, Howard, and that's exactly how I ended up here. Literally on day one in 2007, when I first started working for Align Technology and selling Invisalign. Of course, there were certain things I knew with my background in dentistry and my background in medical, but there was a lot I didn't know and a lot to learn. But one thing that was very apparent, literally on day one, was the lack of experience, A, as you pointed out, and B, the lack of resources and support for what ends up being still a very dynamic and very involved treatment modality with Invisalign. And so on day one, I recognized that was the biggest challenge that I had, that our doctors had. And then fast forward in 2011, when I had the incredible opportunity to go with Align Technology to Europe in an expanded role, I encountered the same exact challenge. And it was really on that premise that I said, you know what, there has to be a better way. There has to be a way that we can provide a deeper level of support and resources. And so that was when we developed ClearTPS. We brought a team of clinicians together that provide these support services, these diagnostic, case evaluation, and treatment planning services to exactly who you described. The kid coming out of their fourth year dental school or their AGD residency, and they haven't treated a single case. We do see some dental schools, University of Texas, San Antonio, for example, they've integrated Invisalign training into the fourth year dental program, which is great news. We need to see more of that. But even in that instance, even if they've put their hands on a couple of cases, there's still so much that they don't know. And that's where we pick up the pieces. We say, is this a good Invisalign case? We'll let our team of experts help you identify the right case. Let our team of orthodontists and general dentists help you diagnose this Invisalign, this orthodontic case properly. And better yet, we're going to manage this digital treatment plan, this ClinCheck treatment plan for you in such a way that it's going to be optimized that you can actually get the result that you want. So that's kind of my short or long answer to that question.
So how long did you work with Invisalign?
A total of 8 years.
So after 8 years in Invisalign, you saw a need for an Invisalign consulting company that consults both clinical and marketing.
Correct.
So
Correct.
if my homies go to ClearTPS, which stands for
Clear Treatment Planning Solutions.
ClearTreatmentPlanningsolutions.com, which I'm there now on my iPhone. What are they going to find?
So they're going to find a couple things. They're going to find clinical support first and foremost. They will also find some resources for Invisalign marketing as well. So those are kind of our staples. A third, of course, is I do Invisalign Practice Integration consulting, of course, more on a local basis. But those are the three pillars, if you will, of what we do to help doctors fully integrate Invisalign into practice.
And if someone's sitting there thinking, so give your pitch on clear aligners, because they're coming out of school and they're saying, well, there's so many things to learn. I can't learn them all. I could go learn TMJ or occlusion at the Pankey Institute, Coy, Spear. I could go learn how to place implants and bone graft. I could learn sleep apnea. I could learn Invisalign, and they can't learn it all, and they only have so much time and money. What's the pitch for Invisalign? I mean, what is reasonably expected? If I've never done an Invisalign case and I do your program like a year from now, what kind of material impact would this have in my office? Should I expect it to be doing one case a month, one case a week? What's realistic?
Yeah, it's a good question, Howard. Let me start at the beginning. First of all, I would encourage these doctors, young, just coming out of school, 5 years out of school, 10 years out of school, whatever the case may be, to first of all, really focus on what moves you, right? To really focus on the types of procedures that you enjoy doing. Dentistry is a really, really tough job. We know that. So really focus on what moves you, what interests you. That's first and foremost. But also look at the fact that really, in my opinion, of course, I'm looking at these things from a commercial and marketing perspective and from a business perspective. I would argue that dentists are business owners, small business owners, even before they're dentists. Now, granted, they come out of dental school as dentists or residency, what have you. But as soon as they turn on the lights at the practice, they're a small business owner. And so alongside of pursuing what moves you, I think equally, if not more important, is understanding fundamentally what is going to A, drive patients to the practice, and B, really turn practice from a production and collections perspective and from a bottom line perspective. And Invisalign facilitates exactly that. And it doesn't mean that you can't do everything else that you do or everything else that you need to do in the practice, or for that matter, the things that you like to do. And so to put it into perspective, we believe that, and with the practices that I've worked with, at absolute minimum, there should be anywhere from 4 to 6 cases a month, minimum. And if you look at the average number of patients just coming through hygiene in an average practice, call it 150 to 200 Invisalign or hygiene patients coming through hygiene. You're familiar with the statistics, anywhere from 75 upwards to 85 or even 90% of patients have some form of malocclusion. So the numbers are there. So first it's kind of painting that picture saying the opportunities are there. How do we get 1 to 3% of your patient base started with Invisalign? Now, if we do that consistently and effectively, you're looking at anywhere from 200,000 to 300,000 in production just in a year.
That's their whole student loans.
That's what I'm talking about.
Invisalign can pay off your student loans.
Absolutely, 100%.
If they did 4 to 6 cases a month.
4 to 6 cases a month. Now, let me just take the opportunity to put that into perspective. That's the average practice. There are practices, Howard, that we work with, that we provide clinical support services to in London, of all places. And of course, certainly you can argue, well, they have, really, really messed up teeth, and they absolutely do. But we have practices in London that do 90 Invisalign cases every single month. 90. And that's a few more than 4 a month. We're talking about 90. So the potential is there. Just even with existing patient database, not to mention new patients that are coming in. And then, of course, what better way to bring new patients in than leveraging Invisalign, like what we talked about.
But you know what? When you're dealing with humans, you want to under-promise, over-deliver. Like, I see dentists all the time, like after a root canal, the patient will say, is this going to hurt? And they're like, no, you'll be fine. Like, what the hell do you want to say that for? You should under-promise. You should say, my God, do you have a gun at home? Because when this wears off, you're probably going to want to shoot yourself. And they're like, oh, my God. Start taking aspirin, ibuprofen, Tylenol right now. I'm going to give you one while you're still numb. I mean, when this wears off, oh, my God. I hope you're not standing on a bridge because you'll probably want to jump off head first. You want to under-promise, over-deliver. Every time I pull a tooth, I show that extractor to the patient and say, look at the hook on the end of that root. That thing was twisted back under your cheekbone, damn near into your eye. I swear to God, when this wears off, you're probably going to want to shoot yourself in the head. And so what I like to tell dentists is that, if you go into Invisalign or you go into implants, whatever, you should aim for, your goal should be 1 a month. I mean, 1 a week. If you don't learn him, if you're going to spend all that money on implants and you can't place 1 a week, then don't do it. And if you're going to do all this Invisalign thing, you should aim for 1 a week. And if you can't do 1 a week, don't do it. And I also see dentists as 2 types. There's the apical, there's the blood and gut barbarians who love implants, endo, oral surgery. They just love blood and guts. That's me. And then there's the clean teeth lovers who like ortho, Invisalign, sleep apnea, bleaching, bonding, veneers. And I also see a lot of the younger blood and guts guys, when they start getting, 50 and they can't see very good and their hands aren't as good and they don't know what's going on, they like to switch out from blood and guts into lean and clean and mean stuff like Invisalign, sleep apnea, bleaching, bonding, veneers.
How do you think that breaks down, Howard, in terms of percentage of blood and guts versus percentage in terms of percentage of doctors who fall in each one of those categories?
I'd say it's the 80-20 world. 80% like the clean stuff, bleaching, bonding, veneers, and 20% just. I mean, for me, it's not even fun unless when I'm done and when I go to wash my hands, I see little pieces of blood on my bald head. I mean, that's when I know I was having fun. There's blood actually on my head. I think the most fun thing in the world is to remove 4 wisdom teeth. There's just nothing more fun than that. But a lot of people love the clean stuff, the ortho, the Invisalign. I want to ask you another. So back to the clinical. She's driving down the street. She's 25. How is she going to learn the clinical? How is she going to learn this? I mean, most dentists will tell you they don't want to do anything until they get an A in the diagnosis and treatment planning and doing. They don't want to get an A in the marketing and have a bunch of patients show up and they're like, what the hell's wrong with this? What's going on?
Yeah, it's a great question, Howard. And I want to relate the question back to what you said a minute ago in terms of this idea of, hey, unless you're going to do, 1 case a week, it's really not worth doing it. But I think it's important to understand and ask the question, hey, doc, or hey, docs, what's keeping you from doing 1 a week? And it might be exactly what you said in terms of that confidence. In fact, we know that to be true based on what Align Technology has identified over and over for the past decade or better, that the number 1 reason why doctors don't submit more Invisalign cases is simply clinical confidence, which again, is why we exist. It's what we address up front. Now, we know that a day-long course, which I think is soon to be a half-day course, and it might even eventually end up on an online course for
On
Invisalign.
Dentaltown.
On Dentaltown. Hey, let's do it.
We don't even have an Invisalign course. We put up 350 courses on Dentaltown, and they've been viewed 750,000 times.
It's incredible.
It'd be the best marketing ClearTPS.com could do. You should do a teaser 1-hour course on Invisalign marketing for your office, and then do another clinical how to do Invisalign. And then at the end, if you want more, go to ClearTPS.com. It'd be the single best marketing you could do.
I like it. No, it's a great idea. And as just to further the answer to your question, the 25-year-old, driving down the street that you just described, what we're able to do is support that doctor from beginning to end. I mean, we've got doctors that we've been supporting for the last almost 5 years. They literally will submit every single Invisalign case over to us. We will hold their hand. We will answer their questions. We will help them diagnose, identify the right cases. We will help them troubleshoot if a case isn't tracking or if the patient hasn't been compliant. And literally for that 25-year-old dentist, we can hold their hand from the beginning all the way, and they can go as deep as they want. We can say, hey, you know what? That's a really complex case. It's going to require auxiliaries and elastics, or do you want, or ask the question, do you want to correct that posterior, class 2, malocclusion, or is it stable? And we can really, really get into a dialogue and provide that support all the way.
When you look at the 9 specialties, this is changing orthodontics, isn't it? Orthodontists. How do you view the changing dynamics of the orthodontic market? Because you could call this a disruptive technology.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was, back in 1998 when 2 Stanford students, one computer scientist and one MBA, realized that, if you left your retainer out for a couple of days, your teeth would move. But then when you put it back in, that they'd move back to where they were. And that's really where that whole idea started. And so early on, the primary target was orthodontists. And what we saw happen, and still happen today, Howard, I think very unfortunately, there's still a slow rate of adoption among orthodontists with Invisalign or aligner therapy in general. And what that has done is that has created this huge space and opportunity and interest among GPs. And now, 15, 17 years later, the orthos are finding themselves in a little bit of an uncomfortable situation as it relates to, the growing percentage of orthodontic starts in general, even outside of Invisalign, that are happening in the GP practice. It used to be 75%. It's probably 80% of total orthodontic starts are coming from the GP practice. And I think aligner therapy has had a lot to do with it, including the likes of 6-month smile and other solutions like that. But I think it's changing it in some very unique ways in the sense of how orthodontists are interacting with their perhaps formerly referring GPs. I think that's something that needs to be discussed in terms of, because I have these conversations with orthodontists all the time. I'm not getting referrals from my GPs. GPs who used to refer, they must be doing it themselves, or they must be doing Invisalign. And I think in a lot of instances that's the case. Now, I think there's also the case that you've got certain orthodontists who have anticipated this interesting dynamic that we're seeing, and they have engaged their GPs in a much different way. They do study clubs in their practice. I'm sure you're familiar with this. They do hygiene study clubs. They are quick to pick up the phone or call the doctor back and actually help them on a case and really empower them in a way that, when the GP invariably comes across a case that they just don't really want to treat, then guess where it's going? It's going to that doctor that supported them.
And that's what I'm telling these young kids when they come out of school. So you go set up in a city. So half the specialists will think in fear and scarcity, and they don't want you to learn anything that'll take money away from them, and the other half thinking hope, growth, and abundancy. And there are periodontists that if you just, why would you need to learn a soft tissue management course or learn any of this stuff when there is one periodontist in your county thinks in hope and growth and abundancy, and you say, hey, will you come in my office and set up the periodontal program with me and my hygienist? And they'll say, absolutely. They'll bring Subway sandwiches and set all up because they want you to do all the soft tissue management, because when you get to something you can't do, they're going to get your business. I see the same thing with orthodontists. These other orthodontists make everybody afraid that if they find out I'm doing Invisalign, he's not going to like me, and I have to sit next to him at the study club and the Kiwanis club, and I'm in the closet that I'm doing short-term ortho. And then there's other orthodontists say, oh, man, that's awesome. Hey, come by my office. I'll put together a study club, and if you get to a case that obviously you can't treat every single case, so there would be a specialist. I mean, look at endodontists. Those endodontists will help you learn endo because they know you're going to do all the one canals. They weren't born under a rock, but obviously there's going to be a lot of molars that you don't want to do. So they'll teach you every endodontic thing they know, because they know that they'd rather have a % of something than 100% of nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's descriptive and characteristic of this inherent fear in the profession as well. And I think it's even more obvious and apparent in terms of specialties with orthodontics. I mean, we talk about it all the time, and I have firsthand experience having worked in a dental school environment, working with all the sections. I mean, we dealt with every specialty, but it was always obvious to me, and in retrospect, looking back, I remember the secret password and the secret handshake that I had to do before I went to talk to the section chair of orthodontics, and I didn't know what that was about. Of course, I'm kidding, but I think it makes the point that it's so isolated, and that's kind of where it all starts. And whether or not that will change, I don't know, but I think.
Well, I got even more proof. Not only was that true when I was in dental school, but when we started Dental Town, all 8 of the 9 specialties just got on Dental Town and shared everything they knew. And one group said, never, give us our own site. And I held out, said, no, come talk to all your referring doctors. No. And that was OrthoTown, and you can't get on there unless you're an orthodontist. So the CEO of Invisalign couldn't get on OrthoTown. I can't get on OrthoTown, and I own the damn website. So it's a cultural change, and it just goes from living in fear to living in hope. But I want to clarify one thing. When I said, when I say these kids, if you're going to learn implants, don't get into it unless you're going to do 1 per week. If you're going to learn Invisalign, don't get into it unless you do 1 per week. And it's not so much the return on investment of all the time and money. It's the fact that the clarity issue when you're talking to specialists or whatever, the clarity defining answer is what is the best for the patient, and you work back from that. And I personally believe that for a doctor, if you're not doing 1 per week, I don't really know if the patient should be seeing you. I mean, I've had 1 surgery, right, a vasectomy. I wouldn't want to go get that done by some guy who did 1 case a year and then say to me, hey, I think I cut the nerve instead of the vas deferens. I think 1 per week is that critical deal. It also explains dentures. When I go into a dental office and this dentist has a filling and a crown and a couple of procedures, and he's doing them every week, he's really, really good. But then a denture will come in, and he only does 1 every 6 months. He doesn't make good dentures.
Yeah.
You really don't get really good at something unless you do it at least once a week for a really long time. And I think that's really the definition of an expert, because I don't think you can say that you're the best person for this job for my patient if you do this every 6 months.
Yeah,
there's got to be someone in the county that does it more often than twice a year.
And that's an excellent point, Howard. It makes me think about Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers and 10,000 Hours, and that certainly applies. But I think it's fundamentally important to go back and try to understand what is keeping these doctors from doing more than 1 implant a week or 1 Invisalign case a week. And that's, again, where we come in. And I think giving them that confidence. In addition, I will challenge the idea that, you wouldn't want to go, or so I certainly would agree that you wouldn't want to go to any physician or doctor or dentist if they're doing less than 1 a week on any procedure, unless They had a team of experts that they partnered with, that they have literally a straight line to, whether it be by email or phone call. And in fact, one of our doctors here locally in Houston, Texas, Dr. Amanda Canto, the way
Oh,
she,
I love her.
isn't she great?
Oh my God, she's the coolest dentist in the
Very
world.
cool. She's very
I
cool.
mean,
And
out of
she,
2 million dentists around the world, who is cooler than Amanda Cantos?
no, Amanda Canto's very, very cool. And she's an exclusive user of ClearTPS. And this is what she says to her patients. She says, look, Mr. Patient, I tell you what, we're gonna assess your case. I'm gonna have a discussion with my clinical team, which is our clinical team, ClearTPS, and we're gonna have a conversation about your treatment and your treatment plan. We're gonna see if you're a suitable candidate for Invisalign. She takes those photos, she uploads them to her Invisalign doctor site, she sends them over to us. In 2 business days, we turn around with a summary, an explanation, a diagnosis, expectation, approximate treatment time, and Dr. Canto gets to confidently go back to that patient and say, hey, Mr. Patient, I got some fantastic news for you. Me and the clinical team, they came back with a very positive response. You're a fantastic candidate. We're going to go ahead and move forward with records. And that's a close right there. It's really not that hard. It's almost easy.
And she is a phenomenal role model. She's her website's what? HoustonDental.com?
I think it's Houston.
HoustonDental.com.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Yeah.
we're 10 days out from Christmas, and so my Christmas present to me from Sheldon Krancher is you're going to call Amanda Cantos and tell her I've been dying to get her on my podcast show for 2 years
Okay.
and guilt her out because when I was in dental school, the senior class had 1 woman. And now these dental schools are half women, and they don't like it when all the role models and instructors are all a bunch of fat, white, bald, cracker males. They want to see women role models, and they tell me that,
Yeah.
and I get emails on that. And if I was a young 25-year-old dentist female that just walked out of school, I couldn't think of a greater role model than Amanda. Could you?
Not at all.
So
She's
you call
incredible.
her up, you say you get on Howard's show. I promised him that for Christmas.
Okay. I will. I promise.
Another thing you remind me of so much is the same thing with implant success. The dentists are always trying to save a nickel, so they buy their implants online from Russia or Israel or some other company, and they get these low-cost implants, but nobody's holding their hand. Yeah. And then when I see the dentists that are placing an implant a month, the only one thing they all have in common is they're buying from a local rep. So it's a big brand name like Noble BioCare, so they're paying twice as much for their implants, but they got someone with your smiley face, your expert knowledge, you seeing the best practices of hundreds of dentists, and he's just living in his own little world. And the people that are holding hands, that's the other reason I don't think Amazon is going to take off with dental supplies, for the same reason Dentaltown didn't sell dental supplies when we started in 1998. When I started Dentaltown, there were 20 other websites, but they were all going to sell supplies. And I was the one that said, who cares? I'm going to build a community, because when you look at a dental office, 35% goes to the doctor, 28% goes to the staff, 10% goes to the lab, only 6% is supplies, and that dentist doesn't care about that 6% for one major reason. When that supply rep is in there from Benco or Burkhardt or Shine or Patterson or whatever, it's not I have a question on the gauze or the anesthetic or the price of lidocaine. It's, hey, I hear this Wave 1 endophile's out. Do any endodontists in my town use Wave 1? And she's like, oh, well, you should talk to the endodontist over here. Talk to Brad Gettleman. Or you say, well, what about this? I mean, it's the community. And for so many shy, introvert, geek dentists, that supply lady is the link to the community. That's why they join a study club. That's why they would rather buy implants from a human being with a smiling face like you that can say, you know what, I'm a little nervous about this because on this particular case, I'm going to have to do a sinus lip, and I'm thinking, should I do a flap or should I do a sinus bump? And they go, you know who you need to talk to? You need to go have lunch with Dr. So-and-so. He's on the other side of town. You'll love him. He'll help you. It's a community. That's what Dentaltown is. Dentaltown doesn't sell really anything. The classified ads are free. Almost everything's free. But they log on there every day. because
Yeah.
everyone they love, their mom, dad, wife, kids, everyone that loves them can't
Yeah.
really help them during a root canal.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
they just long for a community of like-minded people who have the same damn problem. So my advice to you is, if you're going to start placing implants, find out which rep in your town do you have chemistry with. And if you're
Yeah.
going to try to do Invisalign, just look at Sheldon's smiling face and tell me that you don't want to network with this homie.
And it's the truth. I mean, I don't know that there's anyone as passionate as I am about Invisalign integration, as you had mentioned in my
Well,
bio.
Amanda's more. I'm gonna
And
call
maybe
I'm gonna
Amanda
call
Canto.
monkey on that. I'm calling bullshit right out of the gate. It's
and,
Amanda.
and and I'm going to share a story with you that you'll appreciate. So when I was in Europe with Align, one of the most amazing, one of the most rewarding professional experience and personal experiences of my entire life, I was on the European leadership team with the managing director, all the directors, clinical, marketing, sales, and towards the end of that period of time, there was a team building event, and the team building event I was not a part of because I was in the process of transitioning back to the U.S. I heard this story afterwards, and one of the exercises they had was they split into two teams, and the exercise was to identify the one person that if they could go to the moon to sell Invisalign, who would that person be? So after 15, 20 minutes of deliberation, the two groups came back, and they picked the same person, Howard. And who was that person?
It was Sheldon Krancher.
Yeah, they picked me to go to the moon to sell Invisalign.
That is very cool.
You know, and I think I have a very clear vision and understanding of how it all works, and I'm just dying to package it up and give it to every single doctor out there that is open and willing to receiving that. And that's who we are.
When you go to work all day and it's really tough and it's hard, it's called stress. But when you go to work all day and it's really tough and it's really hard and you love it, it's called passion. And the passionate dentists do so much better than the stressed out dentists. And it's all because of your attitude.
Yeah.
I mean, you just got to get passionate. Where do you think your passion comes from? You think your mom and dad instilled that into you? You think your mom dropped you when you were a little kid?
I'm sure she dropped me a couple times, Howard. There's no question about that. Honestly, I think it comes from a couple places. You know, my parents being immigrants, as I had mentioned before, I think there's a certain element there. But I think, the work ethic is something that I got from my father, who, literally before we did anything on Saturday, we had to cut the grass and rake the leaves and pick weeds. And that was in parallel to, having a paper route. And this is at the ripe age of 8 years old. And so I think that's really kind of where it comes from. And then really, just having traveled and the world and having experienced so many different people and cultures in different places, and then having seen dentistry in so many different places, Howard. I mean, I've seen dentistry, first when I was at UCLA School of Dentistry, it was incredible to receive these doctors, these passionate doctors, by the way, from Korea, from Taiwan, India, from all these places in South America, and to interact with them and to see their passion to come to America and to come to UCLA, this amazing educational institution, and then to see, something very similar when I was in Europe working with doctors and dentists, and to see that they all share the same challenges, Howard. They all have, that stressful environment that they work with. And I think our gift, or my gift to these doctors, is, hey, how can we make your life easier? How can we make the profession that you've committed yourself to something that you really enjoy?
I want to switch gears completely and talk about a whole different topic: patient financing. I just want to rant about a couple of things. I mean, in the United States, if you buy something over $1,000, 90% of the time it's bought on installment credit. No,
Yes, sir.
only 10% of the people walk in and plop down $30,000 for a car. The other 90% get financing and pay $500 a month for 36 months. When we go back through history, everybody talks about how famous the Model T was, but they don't finish the story. The Model T, the assembly line was closed down because General Motors started a Chevy, and with the Model T, you had to show up and give them $668, and General Motors started GMAC financing and said, hey, come over here, poor broke farmer. You only have to pay us $49 a month for 36 months. And GMAC was better than Ford, and they closed that line. Another story, me being Irish descendants. In 1950, when 1 million Irish came over here, all the jobs were textile mills. But you couldn't get a job unless you owned a $50 sewing machine. And there were like 80 different sewing machines that were amazing that you could buy. But it was one man from London called Singer who said, these Irish blokes don't have 50 bucks, so I'm going to sell them a Singer sewing machine. And if I give them a machine, they can get a job for $3 a week, and they're going to get paid and give me $1 a week. And he was the only sewing machine that said, give me $1 a week, and you can have that sewing machine today. And guess where all the Irish went? To Singer. And guess where all of our grandparents, guess which sewing machine they had? Singer. And they don't even, and all the other ones went under, just like Henry Ford's Model T assembly line closed down because of installment credit. So Invisalign is a major purchase. You just can't go tell an American, hand me $5,000. I mean, if you ask for 5,000, you might as well ask for 50 million. So how does patient financing play into the successful closing of an Invisalign case?
Yeah, it's critical, Howard, and really what you've described is, characteristic of the entire profession, and really applies to almost every other procedure that they do that's over $1,000, whether it's implant, whether it's a restorative case, aesthetic case, but specifically with Invisalign. And I think that's part of the challenge that I think the profession has, is that it's by far, in my view, patient financing is the most powerful closing tool, yet the most underutilized. And it goes back to the fundamental fact, and not unlike what you said about dentists and their difficulty in this idea of selling treatment. It's just a really difficult thing for them to do. The same is true for the people that are in their practice that are presenting treatment plans. And that's where we focused a lot of our consulting and training, is really looking at that particular piece. Because if we can fix that piece, or not even fix it, but improve it slightly, the entire dynamic of the practice, specific to Invisalign, as you point out, it's a relatively high ticket item, as we refer to it as. And it's really important to effectively leverage the patient financing options that are available, because in effect, now you're presenting a treatment plan and a treatment fee to say, look, we've got some fantastic news for you. We can get you started on your Invisalign treatment for nothing down, and payments for about, $129 a month.
$129 a month?
Absolutely. That's a 60-month term. And so if we're appealing to that 90% that you just talked about, if we're appealing to that 90% that has a tendency to go with a low monthly payment alternative, then why aren't we talking about that? Why is every single treatment plan out there today, including Invisalign, presented in such a way that they're only appealing and addressing the 10% and saying, okay, you have a treatment plan that's $5,000. Now you've basically lost the patient at that moment.
90% of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there's a real opportunity to change the mindset and the mentality as it relates to patient financing. And to your point, I think it's inherent to the culture of the profession as well. Well, I don't want to pay, the 5% fee. Okay, well, with Invisalign, as it turns out, the likes of Care Credit, for example, they have a 3.5% fee that no one knows about, because Care Credit's not out there promoting, a 1.5% discount for Invisalign. No one talks about it, but they have a specific code for 3.5%. Now, the answer to the question of, hey, I don't want to spend, the 5%. Well, first of all, it's 3.5%, which is only about, 1.5% more than what you're paying when they're swiping the credit card. So to me, that argument is completely out the door. But I think more fundamentally, it's gaining the experience and the skills to effectively present treatment and leveraging low monthly payments as a first option. Because when it's a last option, the last option certainly can't be the best one, right? So I think, in terms of patient psychology, let's offer what we believe to be the best option first at $129 a month, no out of pocket. and I think that describes pretty much what's happening in every practice out there, with some exceptions, some of the practices that we've worked with.
It reminds me, are you old enough to remember Orthodontic Centers of America?
I am familiar with Orthodontic Centers of America.
So it's a lost lesson that people need to remember, and that is, it was a good old Catholic boy out of Louisiana, New Orleans, and what he realized is that why are you financing orthodontics? It didn't make sense to him. I mean, you incur the cost every time you come to the orthodontist every month for 24 months. When the orthodontist says, I need $1,500 down, and then I'm going to finance a $3,500, he said, well, that's like, what if you went and got a haircut once a month? And the barber said, I'm going to sell you a 24-month package of getting haircuts, and I need 1/3 down, and I'm going to finance the second third. You'd say, are you out of your mind? Nobody would do that for a mani-pedi or a haircut. Yet they did an orthodontist. He said the pano and ceph, that's $1 each. The bracket's $100. What do you need an economic barrier of a third down? Which was $1,500, which we've already said, if it's over $1,000, 90% of Americans can't afford. So Orthodontic Centers was the first one that said, hey, 0% interest, 0 down payment, $199 a month for 36 months, and you can have orthodontics at Orthodontic Centers of America. And no less than 1 million moms said, oh my God, I don't have a $1,500 down payment. I'm going to Orthodontic Centers of America. And they are the only ones to date from a DSO that made it to the New York Stock Exchange and was publicly traded on the NYSE, and it was all about the financing. There wasn't one mom out there that said their orthodontists are better qualified, they're closer and more convenient. Nobody said anything but one thing. Damn, there's no down payment. I can do that. And I asked orthodontists, I said, why do you charge a third down and finance the back half? Are you going to prepay your labor, supplies, lab, rent, mortgage, equipment, build out computer, insurance, update? Are you going to prepay all that shit? They go, no. I said, then what do you do it? And they go, because the diagnosis, that's the hard work. And I say, okay, well, let me whip out the world's smallest violin and start playing you a pity party about, that was all the work. Put the patient first. She ain't got a down payment. And if I was an orthodontist, I'd have a billboard out on the front road. Come to me. 0% interest, 0% financing, no credit check necessary. For just $249 a month, we'll do your ortho. And Orthodontic Centers of America only had a 1% default rate. Why? Because your customers are all walking around with a bunch of brackets glued to their teeth. And at some point, you're going to have to come back to say, hey, you glued a bunch of shit to my teeth. How do we get all this off?
Exactly. No, you're absolutely right.
It's all financing.
Yeah, and it's another aspect that I'm very passionate about, and I've spent the last 10 years. I worked actually for Capital One Healthcare Finance, Dental Fee Plan. You might remember them.
Yeah.
Worked for them, sold patient financing for them, and then went on to co-found a company called eMedical Lending, which was a multi-lender platform concept. That was in 2006, and we ran that for a couple of years. And I also co-founded another patient financing in the UK when I was working with Align. So I'm very, very passionate about patient financing. What appears to be happening now is the market has been flooded with patient financing companies, and it appears to be more of the same. And so they're really, I mean, they're trying to differentiate themselves from each other, and they're not really doing that. They're in the end they're really all the same, and they're overlooking the fundamental reason why patient financing isn't utilized at a higher level, and it's simply because at the practice level they're incapable. In fact, I was speaking to one of our oral surgeons a while back, and he said it best. And this is no offense to anybody, of course, but he says that in the dental practice environment, we put the most important task, that of presenting the financials, in oftentimes the least capable person, the person who may not have a college degree, may not have any sales or presentation experience. And I'm thinking to myself, that's completely true, but what's that all about? How do we change that? Or how do these patient financing address that piece? They're just trying to get their brochures into the practice. trying to get their doctors to sign up and submit loans. But how do you support them? So not unlike, how do you hold their hand clinically with Invisalign to get them to actually submit that one case a week? What are patient financing companies doing to support their doctors in understanding the fundamentals of how to more effectively leverage this tool and how to more effectively present treatment fees to patients? That's not happening. Care Credit's not doing it. And you have these lenders that have come and gone to the market. Chase, they acquired to get into the space. They said, let's take a crack at it. I don't think they approached it any differently. All these patient financing companies,
who's Chase with now?
So they left the market. So Chase Health Advance left the market. There's all these new players coming in, but to me, they're all the same. And in my vision, Howard, for patient financing is to have a solution that very closely could be described in the way that you described what we know is the lowest default rate segment of healthcare financing, and that is orthodontics. We know that has the lowest default rate across the board. Dentistry, of course, is right in there. So dentistry and orthodontics are the lowest risk segments compared to plastic, vision, bariatric, all these other segments have really, really high default rates. I'm looking for a patient financing company or one of the companies, or I want to eventually, start my own to say, look, this is what we're going to do. We're going to offer exactly what you described, 100% acceptance, zero down, interest free for all these Invisalign patients who we know that ends up being one of the biggest barriers in the end.
So are you, is your religion Invisalign, or are you agnostic? I mean, it's basically the categories called what? Clear aligners?
Yes, clear aligners.
And name, how many brands are there in the clear aligner business?
I've kind of lost track, but I'm going to say probably in the neighborhood of north of 15 at this stage.
Name some of the big ones.
Yeah, so you've got Inman aligners, you've got MTM, you've got red, white, and blue. You've got, of course, ClearCorrect, Invisalign, of course, the biggest. But I will say, and the answer to your question is, none of those clear aligner solutions even remotely compare to Invisalign in a few ways. Number one, from a technology perspective, Invisalign is so far ahead from a technology perspective. These other companies that I mentioned and others really sit in a different category, and that category being MTM, minor tooth movement category. They don't have the technology to really compete. Of course, the second thing that Invisalign has that we talked about is the brand name, the footprint, the global footprint. And so there's a real differentiator. So I'd say that I'm a little more agnostic maybe since I left Align Technology, but right now our focus is really on leveraging the relationship that we have with them, leveraging the brand, and leveraging what ends up being really the most cutting edge solution out there from an aligner perspective. Of course, you've got other. I know that there are other companies that are waiting for certain patents to expire in 2017, and so the aligner market is already interesting, but I think it's about to get a lot more interesting.
You know what I think is the bizarrest thing about Invisalign, though?
What's that?
Dentaltown has 250,000 dentists on there, and I've asked them 100 times, why don't you put a course up on how to teach Invisalign? And they don't even return the email. I mean, I don't even get a reply, nothing. I mean, it's just, every time I've asked them, it's just crickets. And I'm like, how do you pass that up?
Can I tell you why?
Yeah.
It's among many reasons, I'm sure, but really I think it comes down to 20 to 30% quarter over quarter growth. 75% profit margins. And that's, I think, the reality. And I'm not just picking on them. I think that a lot of companies, a lot of organizations that are doing that well. I mean, who does 20 to 30% quarter over quarter growth, Howard? I mean, in the profession, certainly in the profession, it's quite limited. I think in business in general, there are still very few that are doing that well. And when you're doing that well, I think, unfortunately, you don't really look, at 250,000 users on Dentaltown. It becomes less important. Now, I think, and to the point of what we're talking about in terms of the changing dynamic in the aligner market, that could very well change, going into next year and in the next couple of years, where the competition really, the dynamic of the competition really changes. Because while it's true, these quote unquote competitors sit in a different category of minor tooth movement versus the technology and everything else that Invisalign has. From the dentist perspective, do they see it that way? I don't think so. So they see it as, aligner therapy. They don't necessarily know the difference, and in a lot of instances don't really care. And they're looking at what? The bottom line. If I can get what appears to be the same for a fraction of the cost, well, that's where I'm going. And we're seeing that trend. We're seeing a lot of doctors go to the likes of ClearCorrect, for example. We're seeing doctors go to these other solutions, and you kind of can't blame them. And so I think it's an interesting dynamic at the corporate level with Align. I think that they should be, reaching out to you. They should be engaging, for the next 5 years and for what the next 5 and 10 years might hold for them.
Well, they were incredibly smart. They spent all their marketing to the consumer. They built up the name with the 7.5 billion Earthlings, and now they're coming in and saying, "I want Nike, I want Adidas, I want Invisalign," and then that forces the provider to run and go learn how to fill that order.
Yeah.
I mean, so if everybody's selling spaghetti and you went out and marketed $1 billion worth of, hey, order the lasagna. Now every restaurant in town saying, hey, we need to make lasagna. So I think they were genius marketers. And now maybe the market's mature enough where they'll come back and because the one thing they should explain is if they have superior technology, that they should explain that in their CE. So you have orthodontists on your technical team.
We do.
How many orthodontists do you have?
Yeah, so we have 4 orthodontists. We have 4 general dentists, and all of our clinicians have actually worked for Align Technology. So we're kind of like the band getting back together a little bit, and they are phenomenal at what they do. And what's great about them is they obviously are clinically trained, but they're technically trained on the Invisalign ClinCheck treatment planning software. They are true experts on the technical aspect that we do. In addition, there's kind of a third layer that a lot of Invisalign doctors struggle with, and that is the communication aspect of their treatment plan with the technicians in Costa Rica. And they're a fantastic a group of technicians, and there's some clinicians down there as well. We work very closely with them, obviously, in managing these treatment plans on behalf of doctors. But there's that communication variable that can be challenging. But because our clinicians have worked closely or for Align and work closely with these technicians, that communication variable is significantly diminished. And so we can accomplish things that treating doctors can't, again, because of those 3 critical components: the clinical expertise, the technical expertise, and the ability to communicate those to the technician and getting the ideal setup.
So I would love to podcast any of your orthodontists. I mean, you got 4 of them?
Yeah.
Because Invisalign is, when it comes to orthodontics, Invisalign is the most requested podcast and online CE, and we don't have either really. And then second would be like 6-month smiles or 6-month braces or things like that. But yeah, if you got 4 orthodontists, I mean, I'd do all 4. I mean, and as far as online CE, we'd love that too. Have you been down to Costa Rica?
I've been down there many times. It's absolutely beautiful. The facility is incredible. Quite an operation down there, and it's a great place. Have you been down to Costa Rica?
I've been waiting for an invitation for 10 years. I would love to go down. I'd love to go down there and do a story on it, podcast down there. Glidewell's down there too.
Yeah, a couple of other.
So what is it? The 2 biggest dental companies. I mean, Glidewell is the largest dental lab in the world. 5% of all the crowns in America are made by Jim Glidewell. And he's down there in a big way. And then Invisalign's down there. What do you think it is about Costa Rica as opposed to, all their neighbors?
Yeah, I know what it is. So what's interesting is they have a very interesting history. What's I think most interesting about Costa Rica is that they don't have a military. So they literally have zero defense spending as a country. So what's important about that is what they actually do with what would otherwise be spent on defense. They invest it in education, and they have, I think it's 4 or 5 dental schools in the small country of Costa Rica, and so they're turning out doctors all the time, and they have obviously a very good dental technician education system as well. They have the highest literacy rate per capita in Costa Rica compared to, well, certainly any country in Central South America, and they have a high level of English proficiency as well. So it's really the perfect place for any dental company, whether it be Glidewell or Invisalign, and I think there are others. But those are the reasons why Costa Rica has been such a draw. And we've got 2 of our orthodontists that are based in Costa Rica, one of which is one of our clinical directors and one of our lead clinicians. Her name is Dr. Adriana Garro, and she is incredible at what she does. In fact, she would be thrilled to do a podcast. I'm going to kind of volunteer her for that.
Oh, that'd be amazing. But tell her I want to do it in person.
Okay, I will.
Invisalign's got to fly me and Ryan to Costa Rica, and we have to check out all the drinks. Every drink that has an umbrella and a straw, I have to taste test. Then I'll tell you the Costa Rican drink I prefer. No, but seriously, I would love to go down there. I think that would be amazing. I mean, Costa Rica's got 5 million people, but see, I'm down here in Phoenix. 10% of all the homes flipped each year in Phoenix are Canadians. So, they want to get out of those winters and come down here. A lot of my Canadians, so 10% of my practice are Canadians. And a lot of them eventually also have a home even further south in Costa Rica. And my God, they say there are so many Canadians down there that Costa Rica ought to rename itself Canada Part 2. Yeah. Did you notice a lot of Canadians down there?
I know there are a lot of Canadians are down there. And tell me this, Howard, how nice are the Canadians?
Oh my God!
Are they just like the nicest people on the planet, or what?
Well, do you know what the history of why they're nicer?
I don't.
The actual history. This goes to show you how intense culture is. So when this crazy maniac named George Washington said he was going to attack the British Empire and go to war with the only empire who ruled 68 countries, about 10% of America said, "You guys are nuts. I'm getting the hell out of here." And that caused a huge exodus towards Canada. So these are people that aren't crazy enough to declare war on an empire because they raised their taxes on a morning beverage tea when they didn't even drink tea and preferred coffee. And so the Canadians going back a quarter of a millennium were more peaceful, pacifist, sweet. They're just nicer people. I mean, I grew up in Kansas, and I remember my uncles getting mad when they passed laws that you couldn't booby trap your house, so that if someone snuck into your house, you blow them in two with a 12-gauge shotgun.
That sounds like Texas.
Yeah, they thought you should be able to kill someone to protect your personal property. They would never even float that idea in Canada.
No. But there are a lot of them in Costa Rica. In fact, as it turns out, I think there are a lot of them in Cuba, too.
Is there more Americans or Canadians retiring in Costa Rica? Because America's got 10 times as many people as Canada. They got 30 million. We got 330 million.
My guess, even with that stat, I would guess that there are more Canadians in Costa Rica. Maybe by a small.
And that's my traveling tip to all you guys. Like, the first of the year, after Christmas, I got to go lecture in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, then Cambodia. And my trick is that if anybody ever walks up to you with kind of a snared look and says, "Are you an American?" You still say, "No, I'm Canadian. Why?" And they're like, oh, sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry. And then they walk away. And you're like, okay.
Yeah, I've experieed that.
I don't know what that guy was going to kill me over, but I'm not going to find out. Dude, I think you're the coolest dude. Again, if you're thinking about doing implants, find someone to hold your hand. Find a human. Don't go shop for the lowest price, because when you shop for the lowest price, you're never going to get it done, and you're not going to place the implants. And if you're thinking about doing Invisalign, my God, call Sheldon Krancher. Go to ClearTPS.com. You can email them Sheldon@ClearTPS.com. Are you going to give away your phone number? Because I actually got your phone number off the bathroom wall at the Circle K. So do you give it out?
I would be happy to give my phone number out.
What is it?
It's 862-703-1031.
That's 862-703-1031. And you're outside of Houston, Texas in Friendswood. And that name really, because you're very friendly. You should be living in Friendswood. And remember, what are you going to give me for my birthday present?
I'm going to give you a commitment for Dr. Amanda Canto to do a podcast on your show. I'm going to call her right now.
And your orthodontist buddy from Costa Rica.
Yes, and a second one. So you got 2 podcasts from me. Absolutely, 100%.
And you know, if I was you, I'd build an online CE module. Because you got 2 distinct businesses. You got a clinical and you got a marketing. And what I believe in the marketing is that a lot of dentists sit there and you say, well, you want to learn Invisalign, and they wear too many hats. They got to learn business and marketing and root canal. It's just one more thing. But saying, well, will you just listen to this for an hour, and then for an hour you show them how to do it, and then that opens. So you got to take them in steps. You just can't all of a sudden give them instructions how to drive from Houston to Phoenix, because they're like, well, why the hell do I want to go to Phoenix? So give them an hour saying, man, if you drove to Phoenix, look what you would see. And just an hour, look, this is how you do Invisalign. I'm just going to show you an hour. It's not that hard. And then they say, okay, you open the door, you let some light in. Now I'm ready to go to a 2-day course or join ClearTPS.com or something. So, incremental improvements. And that's why I'm doing these podcasts. I mean, it's an amazing because I get great guests like you. They're free. They're on their iPhone. The only reason they're listening to me is because I'm slightly less worse than the radio station on the way to work, which is half noisy, screamy commercials and a bunch of sick songs. And they go, well, that sucks. And Howard is just slightly less suckier. So I'll listen to Howard Dentistry Uncensored. And I do this because in my 30 years, the dentist, all the cream that floated to the top only had one thing in common. They listened to about 100 hours of continuing education a year, their whole career. They didn't walk out of dental school and say, oh, they didn't teach me everything. No, they kept the dental school mentality their whole career, and that's why they floated to the top. And I think they need 100 hours a year. So I give them a daily show. I give them 364 hours a year. And if you just listen to every 4th show for free on your commute to work, your fat butt will eventually float to the top and you'll crush it in dentistry. And a big part of that is for me to be able to get amazing guests on my show like you. Thank you so much for spending an hour with my homies today.
Thank you for having me, Howard. I appreciate it. Hope to come back.
Okay, and if I don't get Amanda for Christmas, I'm coming to Houston. I'll be looking for you.